Okay, I'm going to do these all on one page here. And in fact, I'm going to write something up the top, which is if you have, let's see, if you have, they call it a plus b squared, and you FOILed that out, what you would get would be a squared plus, and then the middle terms, or the two terms multiplied together, a times b, and then doubled, okay, 2ab. And then finally, you'd get that last term squared, okay? If it was a minus b squared, we'd get a squared on the front. The two terms multiplied together, again, a times negative b would be negative ab, and then doubled, negative 2ab, and then finally that b squared at the end. If you had this third option of a plus b, sorry, excuse me, a little glitch there, a plus b times a minus b, this is the other type of special case, you get the middle terms dropping out. You get a squared, and then for outer and inner you get ab and negative ab, so they cancel out, minus b squared. That's called the difference of two squares. So why am I putting it at the top? Because I want you to kind of compare what you've got as your given expression to what's up there. So let's look at number 9. Number 9, we've got for the leading term, for this leading term, we've got a perfect square there. And for the last term, we've got a perfect square there. We also have a middle term. That's what happens with the first two. Okay? With this and with this, you get something squared at the front, something squared at the back, and then a middle term. And what it happens to be, as you can see, here, I'm using my laser pointer now. Here, that's a positive number. Both of those, where you're doing a perfect square, a plus b times a plus b, or a minus b times a minus b, you get a term at the end that's positive, and that's what we see here, a positive term. So which of the two is it? Well, in the first one up top, they're both signs are positive, right? That middle term sign is positive. In the second one in pink, that middle term is negative, and that indicates that what we squared, the original binomial squared, had a negative in between it. For 9, ours has a positive, and so we're going to have a positive. So it's going to look like, we think what we're going to get is something plus something squared, okay? And we'll check it in a second, but how do we then find it out? Well, what is this? What is the square root of h squared? It's h. And what's the square root of 16? It's 4. Okay, so that's what we're going to guess. We're going to go with that as a maybe answer, and then we're just going to check to be sure. And when we check to be sure, how do we check to be sure? Well, we always have in the middle, for the middle term, we've got the first term times the last term, h times 4 or 4h, and then doubled. And then 4h doubled is 8h, and that is what that says. So we know that we did it right. The first clue that we're dealing with a special case is that the first and the last terms are perfect squares. So let's look at that for number 12. Let's try that again for number 12. The first term, yep, and the last term, yep, perfect squares. And by the way, that's a positive number. So we know we're dealing with one of those first two cases. And this is also a positive number too. This middle term is positive. That means that we should guess that we're going to be dealing with a something plus something squared. So the first term, m squared, square root it, m. The last term, 81, square root it, 9. We're going to check just to make sure that we did it right, and it wasn't some, because sometimes you can get an 81 at the end and an m squared at the front by having two different binomials, not the same one squared. So how do we check and make sure that we did it right? Well, we're going to look at the two terms, m and 9, We'll multiply them together to 9m, and then double it. Is 9m doubled 18m, which is here? Yeah, it is. So super, that's the answer. Let's keep going. We've got a perfect square in the front, perfect square in the back, and we've got a positive number here. So we're going to go with, we think it's something squared, and we look here to see what the sign is. Since that number of the middle term is positive, we're going to say that's positive. Now, what is 64x squared, the first term, when you square root it? Well, square root of 64x squared is 8x. What is the square root of the last term? 49. That's 7. Okay. So we think we did it right, but we need to verify. So we're going to take the two terms, 8x and 7, and we'll multiply them together. 8x times 7 is 56x. And if we double 56x, we get 112x. That is that middle term. So we're good. We did it right. And finally, we've got here a perfect square and a perfect square. So we're going to say we think that that's a perfect square. We think that this is what's going on. But this middle term has a negative number, so we think it's going to be negative in between them. Okay. Now, what is the first term? 36s squared. When you square root it, it is 6s. What is the last term when you square root it? 25 square rooted is 5. So now we've got two terms, 6s and negative 5. Multiply them together. 6s times negative 5 is negative 30s. Now double it, and you get negative 60s. And that is what that middle term is. So we believe we did it right. Check your answers against the book, as always, but there you go. Those are special